My name is Evelyn Harper. I was 36 years old, married for 9 years, and I believed my life was stable, honest, and safe. That belief ended on a quiet weekday afternoon, during what was supposed to be an ordinary lunch break. I did not come home because I was suspicious. I did not follow my husband or check his messages. I came home because I forgot a folder of documents I needed for a meeting later that day. That small, careless mistake changed the direction of my entire life. When I pulled into our driveway, I noticed a car that did not belong there. At first, my mind refused to assign it any meaning. I told myself it was a delivery, a mistake, anything but what it truly was. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and felt something shift immediately. The house was too quiet, not peaceful, empty in the wrong way. I stood in the hallway listening. That was when I heard the sound that made my stomach tighten. Running water. Not from the kitchen, not from the guest bathroom. It was coming from the master bathroom upstairs, the one my husband and I shared every day. I remember thinking how strange it was that my heart did not race. Instead, everything inside me slowed down. Each step up the stairs felt deliberate, as if my body already knew what my mind was still trying to deny. At the top of the stairs I stopped. I understood, before opening the door, that nothing would ever be the same again. This was not just about discovering a betrayal. It was about the moment I stopped being the woman who trusted easily and became someone entirely different. Before I continue, I want to ask you something. Where are you listening from today? Please write your city or state in the comments. Stories like this travel farther than we ever expect. Because what happened next did not just break my marriage, it rebuilt me. Before that afternoon, I truly believed my life was something people quietly envied. Not flashy, not dramatic, just steady and secure in a way that felt earned. I had worked hard for it, planned carefully, and trusted deeply. My husband's name was Daniel Harper. He was 40 years old, worked in sales management, and for the past year he had been working from home most days. We met in our 20s, built our careers side by side, and married after what felt like the right amount of time. 9 years later, I believed we had grown into a comfortable partnership, not perfect but solid. Our mornings followed a rhythm that rarely changed. I made coffee while Daniel showered. We talked about work, the news, weekend plans. Sometimes we argued over small things like who forgot to take out the trash, but nothing that felt dangerous or unresolved. I believed disagreements meant honesty. I believed routine meant safety. Our house mattered deeply to me. It was a 2-story home in a quiet American suburb, with neat lawns and familiar faces. I chose the furniture carefully, painted the walls myself, and treated every room like a reflection of the life I was building. That house was my sanctuary, the place where I felt most like myself. We were close with our neighbors too. Across the street lived a couple named Lauren and Mark Bennett. They had 2 young children and a life that mirrored ours in many ways. Lauren and I shared coffee on weekends. We traded recipes, watched each other's homes, and celebrated holidays together. I trusted her, completely. Looking back, that trust feels almost painful to remember, but at the time it felt natural. I believed in the people around me. I believed in the life I had created. That is what made what happened next so devastating. It was not just the betrayal itself. It was the realization that everything I thought was solid had been built on assumptions instead of truth. I did not know it then, but the life I was so proud of was already cracking beneath the surface, and I was about to see exactly how deep those cracks ran. That morning had started like any other, but there were small details that felt off in ways I could not explain at the time. Daniel was quieter than usual at breakfast. He checked his phone more often, turning the screen slightly away from me whenever it lit up. When I asked if everything was okay, he smiled and said he was just stressed about work. I believed him. I always did. I left the house in a rush, already running late, my mind focused on deadlines and meetings. I drove to the office, settled into my desk, and tried to lose myself in emails and reports. But the feeling followed me, a low, uncomfortable pressure in my chest, not fear, not suspicion, just a sense that something was misaligned. Late that morning, as I prepared for an afternoon meeting, I realized I had left an important folder at home, the kind of documents that could not be recreated or replaced quickly. I hesitated before standing up. I considered asking to reschedule, but professionalism won out. I told my supervisor I needed to step out briefly and promised I would be back within the hour. The drive home took less than 15 minutes, yet it felt longer. I remember gripping the steering wheel and telling myself I was being dramatic, that I was tired, that nothing was wrong. People do not just stumble into life-altering moments on a random weekday, I thought. When I turned onto my street, everything looked normal at first. Same houses, same parked cars, same quiet rhythm. Then I noticed something that made me slow down. There was a car in my driveway that did not belong there. My first reaction was confusion, not alarm. I assumed it was a mistake. A neighbor parking temporarily. A delivery driver. Anything reasonable. I parked on the street, walked up to my front door, and unlocked it with my key. The moment I stepped inside, the air felt different. The house was silent in a way it never was during the day. Daniel always played music while working. The absence of sound felt heavy. I called his name from the hallway. No answer. That was when I heard it. The faint but unmistakable sound of running water coming from upstairs. And without knowing why, I felt my life begin to tilt. At first, I tried to explain the sound away. Daniel sometimes took long showers during the day when he needed a break. It was one of his habits. I told myself that was all this was, just another ordinary detail I was overthinking. But the car in the driveway did not fit that explanation. I closed the front door quietly and stood still, listening. The water continued to run, steady and unhurried. As I walked toward the staircase, I noticed small things that felt wrong. Shoes that did not belong to me near the entryway. A faint, unfamiliar perfume in the air, mixed with the scent of my own home. Each step upstairs felt heavier than the last. My body moved forward, but my mind lagged behind, desperately trying to keep the truth at arm's length. I remember gripping the banister as if it could steady me, as if holding on to something solid might stop what was coming. Halfway down the hallway, I heard voices. Not loud, not laughing. Low voices close together, intimate in a way that left no room for misunderstanding. My heart finally reacted then, not with panic, but with the sharp clarity that cut through every excuse I had been making. The door to the master bathroom was not fully closed. Light spilled out into the hallway. Steam crept through the opening, carrying warmth and sound with it. I stood there for a moment longer than I can explain, frozen between two versions of my life. Part of me wanted to turn around, to leave the house, drive back to work, and pretend this moment never happened. I understood in that pause that once I opened that door, I would never be able to close it again. But another part of me needed the truth, even if it destroyed me. I pushed the door open. The sight in front of me did not register all at once. It came in fragments, water spilling over the edge of the bathtub, bare skin. The sound of the shower masking everything except the truth itself. Daniel was there, and he was not alone. For a brief second, neither of them noticed me. They were completely absorbed in each other, careless and unguarded inside the space I had always considered sacred. Then the woman turned her head. Our eyes met. Her expression shifted instantly, from comfort to terror. Daniel followed her gaze and froze when he saw me standing there. No words came out of his mouth, none were necessary. In that moment, something inside me ended, not my marriage, not my trust. The woman I had been until that second ceased to exist. I did not scream. I did not cry. I did not ask questions or demand explanations. What surprised me most in that moment was how calm I felt. Not calm in a peaceful way, but in a cold, focused way, as if my emotions had stepped aside to let something stronger take control. Daniel opened his mouth and said my name, as if hearing it might reverse what I had just seen. The woman behind him shrank back, clutching the edge of the bathtub, her face drained of color. They were waiting for chaos, for hysteria, for me to fall apart. Instead, I spoke slowly and clearly. Do not move. My voice did not shake. I did not raise it, but something in my tone made Daniel stop immediately. He froze where he was, one foot braced against the tub, unsure whether to step toward me or away. I backed out of the bathroom without breaking eye contact. My movements were steady, deliberate. When I reached the door, I closed it and turned the lock. The click echoed through the hallway, loud and final. What are you doing? Daniel's voice came from the other side, sharp with panic now. Stay where you are, I said. You have done enough moving for one day. For a few seconds I stood there, my hand still resting on the doorknob. I could hear the water shut off. I could hear frantic whispers, but I felt strangely removed from it all, as if I had stepped outside the scene one was living in. I walked into my bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, and picked up my phone. There was one call I needed to make, one person who deserved the truth just as much as I did. Mark Bennett answered on the second ring. "Hey, Evelyn," he said cheerfully. "Everything okay?" "No," I replied. My voice was steady, but the words were heavy. "I need you to come to my house right now. There is something you need to see." There was a pause on the line, a shift in his breathing. "Is Daniel okay?" he asked. I closed my eyes for a brief moment before answering. "No, Mark, he is not." I ended the call and set my phone down beside me. From behind the locked door, the knocking began. Softer at first, then louder. Pleading voices followed, tangled with excuses and half-formed apologies. I did not respond. For the first time since opening that bathroom door, I understood something clearly. I was no longer reacting. I was deciding. While I waited for Mark to arrive, I stayed seated on the edge of the bed, listening to the sounds coming from the other side of the locked door. The whispers had turned urgent. Daniel's voice rose and fell, pleading, bargaining. Lauren's voice followed, sharp with panic, then soft with fear. They were no longer lovers in control of a secret. They were two people scrambling to survive exposure. That was when I noticed Daniel's phone. He had left it on the nightstand, face up, exactly where he always placed it when he showered. For years, neither of us used passcodes. We called it trust. At that moment, the word felt almost cruel. I picked it up and unlocked the screen. What I found was not a single mistake. It was a history. The messages went back months. Good morning texts filled with affection. Compliments he had not given me in years. Plans carefully scheduled around my work hours. Jokes, laughing emojis. Conversations about me that made my chest tighten. "She is so predictable," Lauren had written in one message. "She never comes home at lunch." Daniel replied with a smiley face and a comment about how easy it was to manage my schedule. I scrolled, my hand steady even as something deep inside me cracked open. There were photos. Nothing explicit, but intimate enough to tell the story clearly. Selfies taken in my house. In my living room. In the guest bathroom. Places I had decorated, cleaned, and loved. Then I saw the messages that changed everything. They were not just planning an affair. They were planning an exit. Daniel had written about divorce strategies, about timing, about making sure I would not take more than the minimum. He mentioned moving money, delaying conversations, waiting until things were arranged properly. Lauren responded with enthusiasm. She talked about finding a new place, about how her children would adjust, about how this was all worth it once they were finally free. Free. I sat there holding the phone, understanding the full scope of the betrayal for the first time. This was not carelessness. This was not weakness, it was calculation. The knocking on the bathroom door grew louder. Daniel called my name again, his voice shaking now. He promised explanations, apologies, counseling. I did not answer. Because the woman sitting on that bed was no longer shocked. She was informed. And that made all the difference. The doorbell rang shortly after. The sound cut cleanly through the tension in the house, grounding everything in reality. Mark had arrived. I stood, took a slow breath, and walked downstairs. When I opened the door, Mark was standing on the porch in his work clothes, concern written across his face. He looked confused, worried, and completely unprepared for what he was about to hear. "Evelyn," he said, stepping inside, "what is going on? You sounded serious." For a brief moment I hesitated. Once I spoke the truth out loud, there would be no turning back. His life, like mine, would split into before and after, but protecting him from pain would only protect the lie. "Lauren is upstairs," I said. "She is in my bathroom, with Daniel." The words hung between us, heavy and unmistakable. Mark stared at me, his face tightening as his mind tried to reject what he had just heard. "With Daniel," he repeated quietly. I nodded. I locked them in. He did not shout. He did not move at first. He just stood there, as if his body had forgotten how to function. Then he exhaled slowly and ran a hand over his face. "How long?" he asked. I handed him Daniel's phone without saying a word. We sat down in the living room, side by side on the couch I had once chosen because it felt warm and welcoming. Mark scrolled through the messages in silence. I watched his shoulders slump, his jaw tighten, his eyes glaze with the same hollow disbelief I had felt less than an hour earlier. "This has been going on for months," I said quietly. "They planned everything." Mark stopped scrolling and stared at the floor. "My kids," he murmured. "How do I explain this to my kids?" That was when the weight of it truly settled. This was not just about broken trust between adults. It was about families, children, lives built on lies. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. "We did not do this," I said. "They did." Mark nodded slowly. The shock in his eyes began to shift into something else. Resolve. Pain hardened into clarity. We sat there for another moment, two people bound by the same betrayal, no longer strangers but unwilling allies. Then Mark stood up. "It is time to hear what they have to say," he said. I rose beside him, feeling something unexpected settle in my chest. For the first time since that afternoon began, I did not feel alone. We did not rush upstairs. That was a choice. Power is often quiet, and in that moment, neither of us needed to prove anything. The voices behind the locked bathroom door had changed again. The pleading had turned sharp, edged with blame. Even trapped, they were turning on each other. I picked up my phone and opened the voice recorder. "Before we confront them," Mark said, his voice low and steady, "we make sure this is handled the right way." I nodded. I already understood what he meant. I walked to the bathroom door and knocked once. Not hard, not angry, just enough to be heard. "You can speak now," I said, "but you should choose your words carefully." Daniel's voice came first, rushed and uneven. "Evelyn, please. This is not what it looks like. We were just talking and things got out of hand." Lauren interrupted him immediately, her voice tight with fear. "That is not fair. You told me you were already done with the marriage." I met Mark's eyes. He understood instantly. I pressed the record button. "So you are saying this has been going on for a while?" I asked calmly. Silence. Then Daniel spoke again. "We did not plan it like this. We were going to tell you both. We were just waiting for the right time." "The right time," Mark repeated flatly from beside me. "Yes," Daniel said. "We did not want anyone to get hurt." I felt a slow burn spread through my chest, not rage but certainty. "How long?" I asked. 6 months, Lauren whispered. 6 months of lies, I repeated, making sure the words were captured clearly. From inside the bathroom came the sound of quiet crying. Regret finally had a voice, but it was too late. We stepped away from the door. The truth was no longer hidden. It was documented. Next came the calls. I contacted my attorney first, explaining only the facts, evidence, timelines, recorded admissions. Her response was immediate and focused. Mark called his lawyer next, then his sister who would help with the children that night. I watched the afternoon unfold with surprising calm. Each decision stitched a piece of my dignity back into place. I was not reacting anymore. I was directing the outcome. And the people who believed they were in control had no idea how quickly their world was about to collapse. After the calls were made, the house fell into a heavy silence, the kind that comes after decisions, not before them. Mark and I stood at the bottom of the stairs, listening to the muffled sounds behind the bathroom door. No more arguing now, just quiet. The sound of two people realizing the story they were writing had reached its end. I took a breath and felt how different it was from the ones I had taken earlier that day. This one was steady, grounded. "It is time," I said. Mark looked at me carefully. "Are you sure?" I nodded. I was. We walked upstairs together. I stopped in front of the bathroom door and placed my hand on the doorknob. For a brief moment I remembered how instinctively I had locked it, that first act of self-protection. Now this was something else. This was a choice. I unlocked the door and stepped back. Daniel came out first, wrapped in a towel, his confidence gone, his eyes red and unfocused. Lauren followed behind him, holding herself together with shaking hands. They looked smaller somehow, exposed in a way that had nothing to do with their lack of clothing. "Do not touch me," I said when Daniel reached out. My voice was calm but final. They froze. "Here's what will happen next," I continued. "You will get dressed and leave this house. Daniel, you will return only once, with a neutral witness, to collect essentials. The locks will be changed tonight." Daniel opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. He had nothing left to say. Mark stepped forward. "Lauren, you will come home long enough to pack a bag. Then you leave. The lawyers will handle the rest." Lauren began to cry. Daniel stared at the floor. I felt no satisfaction, no triumph. Only relief. The illusion was over. And so was my silence. When they finally left the house, the door closing behind them did not sound dramatic. There was no slam, no final shout, just a quiet click like the end of a chapter being sealed. Mark and I stood in the living room for a long moment, surrounded by furniture that suddenly felt like it belonged to different people. "How do you feel?" Mark asked softly. I searched for the answer and realized it surprised me. "I do not feel broken," I said. "I feel awake." He nodded, understanding exactly what I meant. We hugged briefly, not as anything complicated or romantic, but as two people who had survived the same storm. Then he left to face his own hard night, his children, and the conversations that would change his life. I stayed. That evening I walked through my house slowly, room by room. I opened windows, I changed the sheets. I erased the physical traces of what had happened, not out of denial but out of ownership. This space was mine again. The weeks that followed were not easy, but they were clear. My lawyer confirmed what the evidence had already promised. Daniel's plans to control the divorce collapsed under their own weight. The messages, the recordings, the timeline all spoke louder than any excuses he tried to make later. The settlement was fair, final, clean. But the most important changes were not legal. Without Daniel, the constant background tension disappeared. I slept better. I laughed more easily. I noticed how small my world had been, shaped around someone who never truly respected me. I signed up for things I had postponed for years: a writing class, a weekend trip alone, long walks without explaining myself to anyone. I learned something vital during that time. Losing the life I thought I had did not mean losing myself. It meant I finally had the space to meet who I really was. That betrayal did not end me. It introduced me to my strength. It has been 2 years since that afternoon, since the moment I stood in my hallway and realized the life I trusted was built on a lie. Time has softened the sharpest edges of the pain, but it has sharpened something far more important: my understanding of myself. Today my home feels different, not because of new furniture or fresh paint, but because of the energy inside it. It is no longer a place where I tried to be smaller, quieter, easier to love. It is a place where I exist fully, without apology. I ran into Daniel once, unexpectedly, in a grocery store aisle. He looked tired. Older, like someone who had spent too much time running from the consequences of his own choices. He apologized. I believed he meant it, but I also realized I did not need it. Indifference, I learned, is not cruelty, it is freedom. This story is not about revenge. It is about clarity, about the moment a woman stops explaining her worth and starts protecting it. Betrayal did not define me. My response to it did. If you are listening to this and you feel invisible in your own life, unappreciated, or quietly shrinking to keep the peace, I want you to hear this clearly. Your strength is already there. You do not need permission to claim it. Sometimes it takes a painful awakening to remember who you are, but that awakening can change everything. My marriage ended, my illusion shattered, but I gained something far more valuable than what I lost. I gained myself. If this story resonated with you, if it made you pause or reflect, I invite you to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Share your thoughts in the comments and let me know where you are listening from and what time it is there. I read every message. Thank you for being here. And remember, sometimes the end of one story is the beginning of the most powerful one you will ever tell.